I'm Catherine Ross, and I'm here live from the floor of the NYSE with Jim Cramer. Jim, what's top of mind for you?
Top of mind is how well the market acts, despite the fact that we're told it's going to go down. I mean, here you have Procter pre-announcing bad number. No one seems to care. You have Norwegian Cruise saying that, look, they're going to cancel their trips, although they did have better numbers. No one seems to care. You have drug stocks doing well. No one seems to care. The Democrats obviously are against them. And I'll tell you what I think it is. I think there's a presumption after last night that Bernie Sanders is going to win, and that Bernie Sanders can't win the general. He can only win the primaries. We've seen this before with George McGovern in 1972, where you had a very good handle on the fact that Nixon was going to win, because the market has already decided that Bloomberg is not going to win. I think this is rather amazing, frankly, because I did, just full disclosure, work for the mayor at one point, and he's incredibly charitable. It looked like it was used against him, oddly. I don't want to go in, I'm not a political guy, but let's just say that I think that what's happened is people say, Trump's going to win. And it's not going to be, it's going to be hands down, and it's going to be a coronation. And the tweet that the president had today was devastating. It was just it's just terrible. And meantime, even the Chinese stocks are moving up, just, the caterpillars. So there's a sense that maybe the virus is coming to a conclusion. I have a piece in Real Money that says that's not true. That mergers are back, and that's Gorman, and that that things are better than we thought because Trump is done. He's going to be in, and that's what this is about.
Let's talk about your Real Money piece, which you can read, of course, over on realmoney.com, because you say that, the market keeps thinking that this is going to get resolved, meaning the coronavirus, but should the market have that kind of faith at this point?
Well, I think that the notion of the piece is that when you look at the CDC numbers for the, let's call it regular flu, there's a tremendous increase in mortality when you get older. And we've all accepted that. Well, there's the pretty very similar lethality to this novel virus, but obviously it's more easily transmitted. So what I say is that what we're going to end up doing is say, look, elderly people should not lead a normal life because it's too likely that, an 85-year-old on a cruise, that was a mistake. And now, they didn't know it was a mistake when they took the cruise. So the elderly should not go where people congregate. The younger people, it's going to be a flu. And if you have good public health, it'll be handled. But I don't think people realize that when you get the flu when you're older, there's nothing for you. There's no antivirals. So you often die. And that's what we're dealing with. We're dealing with a easily transmitted flu that leads to death in many cases for older people. Now, anything north of 5% mortality is considered to be pretty much catastrophic in the medical community. So you have that for that age. Now, if the Chinese were at all organized, they would say, listen, we've cordoned off, to our best of ability, the one area, Wuhan area. It's 50 million people. It's a giant cordon, but not for a country of 1.4 billion. And that there is, each day that goes by, there are fewer people, and that's what the numbers, although you can't really trust the numbers, who are getting it. But what's more important is we know who is getting it. It's the elderly, and when the elderly get it, there's a very big increase in the possibility of death. If you want to know what it looks like, read the CDC note from last year, which talks about death for our flu. And it's rather chilling. And that's what we're getting if you're older. So I think that elderly, because there's no antivirals and because there's no vaccine, elderly, if they stay at home, that's how you get a decline in deaths. That's how you get it. And the Chinese are so poorly equipped, even though they're well equipped to be able to cordon because they can shoot people. This is not it's not a democracy. It's an authoritarian government. But they're doing a good job of cordoning, even if they're doing a lousy job of reporting.
I want to circle back to the debates because you just said that the market thinks that, Bernie Sanders might win.
Yeah, that's what I see with the market bouncing back. That's what I think it is.
So do you think that the market is at this point breathing kind of like a sigh of relief?
Absolutely, and I think that that's evidenced in everything from the drug stocks to the industrials to the China stocks. How can Nike be only be up. Procter doing nothing. I mean, there's a belief that valuations, remultiplication of stocks because things are better than you think under Trump. Trump is, hate him or like him, is viewed very positive for the stock market. And a Sanders victory, a socialist with a lot of communist leanings, does not have the popularity in America that the Democrats seem to ascribe it to. It's almost as if the Democrats have a death wish against Trump because they're not going to unite. They're just going to keep killing themselves. And by doing that, there's a belief that you should go buy stocks because the stock market is going to discount a Trump win, regardless of what polling you see, because there are fewer socialists in the Democratic Party than people think, or at least Sanders thinks. I mean, he's a avowed socialist with communist leanings. I'm not being some sort of Red Scare guy. I'm just listening to what he says. It's pretty clear, for instance, that he believes that it's shameful that Bloomberg's rich. Shameful. Now, what do you do if it's shameful? Well, the only way to deal with that is to expropriate. Expropriation is a form of government taking control of your wealth, which is communist. And look, I studied communism, and let me make this really clear. You can have communism and not have a dictatorship. For instance, I have a house in an area called Montespertoli, Italy. It's a communist government in that state. And they tell me what to do. They tell me what to grow. They tell me where I can sell. They tell me what I'm not allowed to sell. And it's very popular. It's a communist state left over from the 40s. And I accept it. A lot of people don't want to have a house in the state because they tell you what to do. They're communists. But it's accepted. And I think that that's very similar to what I think that Bernie would do. And I don't know. I mean, having dealt with a communist government, you can deal with them. You know, they take what you have. In return, they let you live. And that's the bargain that I chose when I bought a house in Montespertoli. When I heard that it was a commune and that it was communist, I didn't anticipate that I would not be able to grow what I wanted to grow, or that my goods would be confiscated. But, you know, that's what you came to the nuisance. And when I listen to Bernie, it reminds me of a beautiful part of Tuscany. And people accept it. And I think there are a lot of people who would like to take Bloomberg's wealth and distribute it. But you'd have to have a government that expropriates that wealth. And that's not socialism. It's not socialism. We've studied socialism. Socialism is very different. Socialism is a shared concept. Shared health care, shared goods. But it's not necessarily expropriation. But communism is. And after last night, I think anyone who thinks that this is just socialism didn't listen. Again, there's no sin in being a communist. There could be a sin in voting for a communist. When I meet with the government in Italy, I say, okay, well, listen. They want wealth to be distributed, and I think that's great. I don't want it here.
Jim, we've seen a number of acquisitions this morning. The first one that I want to talk about is the Morgan Stanley acquisition of E-Trade. And, right. You know, looking at this was the biggest acquisition that the bank has made since the financial crisis. And I got to wonder, is this their way of trying to reach out to the Robinhood audience?
I think that this was E-Trade putting up the white flag, saying, listen, we're for sale for a reasonable price. And Morgan Stanley saying, you know what? We're just going to snap this up. E-Trade was not growing. Robinhood's growing like a weed. So if you wanted to make it so that you could take a big chunk of accounts before they are taken by Robinhood, then you buy E-Trade. And E-Trade put itself up for sale before they're eviscerated by Robinhood. So it made a lot of sense, and that's what's happening. And I look at it and I say to myself, E-Trade was done. They couldn't compete. Robinhood has 10 million accounts. E-Trade's had 5 million accounts forever. They zoomed right by E-Trade. So E-Trade, not unlike Ameritrade, just said, you know what? We're done. And the cost savings of just kind of mowing down all the people who work at E-Trade, because you just need Morgan Stanley people. E-Trade's much more electric. It is very good for Gorman. So it made a lot of sense. Morgan Stanley had an unbelievable quarter, and it didn't matter. This is a great way to address it. Gorman's a very smart guy. I'm going to go with him.
L Brand
Morgan
sold.
Stanley's interesting.
Are you looking at it in the portfolio for any
I
reason?
have to. It's very interesting. We'll talk about the portfolio, obviously, on our action alerts. But yeah, that's a very interesting deal. And Gorman's doing a great job.
So right after this, follow us over to actionalertsplus.com to watch our daily rundown show. But Jim, before we go there, I do want to ask about L Brand selling a majority of Victoria's Secret.
Yeah,
do you think that this was the right
down
choice?
Initially, and then I think people realized, listen, Wexner's out. That means that there's going to be new blood coming in, and that's viewed as very positive. So I don't know why Sycamore feels they can turn around Victoria's Secret. Good luck to them. Maybe they can. But the rest of the business is pretty good. And with new blood, I think that you could have a possible positive story in the mall. Very few positive stories in the mall. You'd have to close a lot. They're going to have the flexibility to do so, since they're taking in the money. They got a good price for Victoria's Secret. Very good price. So they got a really good price for Victoria's Secret, and Wexner's gone. These are two very big positives.
For L Brands, is this kind of the road to redemption, do you think?
No, it's still a mall, but it's better than it used to be.
All right, Jim, thank you so much for joining us today. Guys, thanks for watching. We are now heading over to our Action Alerts Plus Daily Rundown Show over on actionalertsplus.com. I'm Catherine Ross, and we'll see you tomorrow.